The next day, I received a call that changed my life forever. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m. as always. Anne opened her eyes, staring at the familiar ceiling of her bedroom. At 48, her body protested the early awakening. But her mind was already alert, ready for another day at the hospital. 23 years of nursing had molded her routine with the precision of a Swiss watch. As she got ready, Anne observed her reflection in the bathroom mirror. A few grey strands stood out in her brown hair, silent witnesses to countless nights on call. Her green eyes, though tired, still shone with the same determination as when she began her career. Another day, another chance to make a difference, she murmured to herself, a mantra that sustained her through the toughest days. At 6:15 a.m., Anne left her house. The crisp morning air enveloped her, promising a pleasant day. Her car, a 5-year-old compact, waited faithfully in the garage. In 15 minutes, she would be at the hospital for her 7 a.m. shift. The radio played softly as she drove, her mind already anticipating the day's tasks. An important meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m., something about a new project in the pediatric ward. Anne smiled, remembering how much she loved working with children. Then it happened. A bend in the road revealed a scene that made Anne's blood run cold. Her car had crashed into a tree, the front completely destroyed. Smoke rose from the crumpled hood. Anne stopped abruptly, her heart pounding. Her nursing instincts took over. Within seconds, she was out of the car, running towards the wreckage. "Can anyone hear me?" she shouted, approaching cautiously. A faint moan answered. Anne leaned down, peering through the shattered passenger side window. Her heart nearly stopped. 2 identical girls, no older than 8, were trapped in the back seats. Twins. Blood trickled from a cut on one of their foreheads. "Hey, sweeties, can you hear me?" Anne spoke softly, trying to stay calm. "I'm Anne. I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." One of the girls opened her eyes, frightened. "Mommy," she whispered. Anne quickly glanced at the driver's seat. Empty. Where was their mother? There was no time to think about it. The smell of gasoline filled the air. Anne knew she had minutes, maybe seconds, before the worst happened. "What's your name, honey?" she asked, working to open the jammed door. "Sophie," the girl replied weakly. "My sister is Marie." "Okay, Sophie, I need you to be very brave now. I'm going to get you and Marie out of here." The door finally gave way with a metallic groan. Anne reached Sophie first, her nimble fingers releasing the seatbelt. Carefully, she pulled the girl out, placing her gently on the grass by the side of the road. "Sophie, stay here. Don't move. I'm going to get your sister." Anne returned to the car. Marie was still unconscious, the cut on her forehead bleeding more now, her heart in her mouth. Anne freed her from the seatbelt and carried her out. They had barely gotten a few feet away when a deafening explosion erupted behind them. The car had caught fire. Anne threw herself over the girls, shielding them with her own body. The heat of the flames licked her back, but she didn't move. Sirens wailed in the distance, rapidly approaching. Anne lifted her head, seeing the emergency vehicles arriving. Paramedics jumped out of the ambulances, running towards her. 2 girls, twins, approximately 8 years old. Anne reported quickly to the first paramedic who arrived. "Sophie is conscious. Possible concussion. Marie is unconscious. Lacerations on her forehead. Suspected head trauma." The paramedic looked at her, surprised by the precision of the information. "You're a nurse?" Anne finished. "Anne Dubois from Central Hospital." As the paramedics attended to the girls, Anne finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking, the adrenaline beginning to wear off. A police officer approached. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" Anne recounted the events, her professional mind registering every detail. But one question lingered. "Officer," she interrupted her own narrative. "Where is their mother?" The officer frowned. "We haven't found anyone else at the scene. The car is registered to a Claire Beaumont. We're trying to locate her now." Anne watched as the twins were placed in the ambulances. Sophie, now fully awake, was crying silently. Marie had yet to regain consciousness. "Can I go with them?" Anne asked, surprising herself. The paramedic nodded, grateful. "Your experience will be helpful." As she climbed into the ambulance, Anne glanced at her watch. 6:55 a.m. She would be late for work, miss the important meeting. But looking at Sophie and Marie's pale faces, Anne knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The ambulance sped off, sirens wailing. Anne held Sophie's hand, whispering words of comfort. Her mind, however, was filled with questions. Who was Claire Beaumont? Where was she? And why did Anne feel like this accident was only the beginning of something much bigger? As the hospital drew closer, Anne couldn't imagine how this day, which had begun so routinely, would change her life forever. The emergency room clock read 8:37 a.m. when Anne finally walked through the doors of Central Hospital. Her uniform, stained with soot and sweat, contrasted sharply with the sterile environment. Curious glances followed her as she hurried down the hallway. Damn, 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 Anne muttered, her mind oscillating between worry for the twins and the acute awareness of her tardiness. The important meeting, the one that could change the course of her career, had started over half an hour ago. As she rounded the corner towards the conference room, Anne collided with an imposing figure. Thomas Moreau, the hospital director, stared at her with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Anne, where on earth have you been?" His voice, normally controlled, had a sharp edge that made Anne flinch. "Thomas, I can explain. There was an accident and I—" "No, Anne, not now," Thomas interrupted, raising a hand. "The meeting is over. The board has made its decisions. Come to my office in 10 minutes. Before Anne could protest, Thomas had already walked away, leaving her alone in the hallway, a knot forming in her stomach. 10 minutes later, Anne hesitantly knocked on Thomas's office door. The sound of his voice inviting her in seemed strangely distant. Thomas sat behind his desk, his glasses perched on the end of his nose as he examined some documents. Without looking up, he gestured for Anne to sit down. 23 years, Anne," Thomas began, finally looking at her. 23 years of impeccable service, never late, never a complaint. And today, of all days, you decide not to show up for the most important meeting of the year." The words hit Anne like a punch to the gut. Flashbacks flooded her mind. 5 years ago, Anne, staying late to cover for a sick colleague, missing her niece's birthday. 3 years ago, cancelling her vacation at the last minute because the hospital was short-staffed during a flu outbreak. Last year, working a double shift on Christmas so colleagues with children could be home. Each memory was a reminder of her unwavering commitment to the hospital and her patients. "Thomas, I understand the gravity of the situation," Anne began, her voice trembling, "but there was a terrible accident on the road. 2 little girls, twins, were trapped in a burning car. I couldn't just—" "Drive by," Thomas finished, his expression softening slightly. "No, of course you couldn't. It's who you are, Anne. It's why you're one of the best nurses we have." For a moment, Anne felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Thomas understood, after all. "But," he continued, and Anne's hope withered, "the timing couldn't have been worse. The board was deciding on the leadership of the new pediatric project. Your name was at the top of the list, Anne." Anne's heart sank. The pediatric project, her chance to make an even bigger difference, to implement the innovative ideas she had been developing for years. "Was?" she asked, dreading the answer. Thomas sighed heavily. "Yes, it was. But your absence, well, it was interpreted as a lack of commitment. The board decided to give the position to Michelle Dupont. Michelle Dupont, new to the hospital, ambitious, efficient, and 10 years younger than Anne. The unfairness of it all hit Anne like a wave. 23 years of dedication, countless personal sacrifices, all seemingly forgotten because of a single instance of tardiness. Tardiness caused by an act of heroism, no less. "I understand," Anne said, her voice surprisingly calm, belying the turmoil of emotions within. "May I go now?" Thomas seemed momentarily taken aback by Anne's controlled reaction. "Yes, of course. And Anne, I'm sorry. I truly am." Anne stood up, her legs trembling slightly. As she made her way to the door, Thomas spoke again. "Oh, and Anne, the twins you rescued, they're okay. I thought you'd like to know." She nodded silently and left the office. In the hallway, Away from Thomas's gaze, Anne finally allowed the tears to fall. The injustice of it all consumed her. Every sacrifice, every extra hour, every missed holiday, it all seemed to have been for nothing. Leaning against the cold hospital wall, Anne closed her eyes, letting the memories flow. 10 years ago, Anne, holding a frightened child's hand during a thunderstorm that caused a hospital blackout, telling stories by candlelight to calm the young patients. 7 years ago, spending sleepless nights studying new pediatric care techniques, dreaming of the day she could implement them. 2 years ago, organizing a fundraising campaign to buy more modern equipment for the children's ward. Each memory was a stab at her heart, a painful reminder of her seemingly disregarded dedication. But then, another memory surfaced. Sophie's scared face, Marie's small hand in hers as the ambulance raced towards the hospital. And with that memory came a realization. It didn't matter what the board thought. It didn't matter that she had lost the promotion. What mattered were the lives she touched daily, the lives she saved. With a deep sigh, Anne wiped away her tears. The injustice still stung. Yes, the disappointment still weighed heavily on her chest. But there was work to be done, patients who needed her. Straightening her shoulders, Anne walked towards the pediatric ward. Maybe she wasn't leading the new project, but that wouldn't stop her from doing the best job possible. And who knew? Maybe one day the hospital would realize the mistake they had made. As she walked, Anne couldn't help but think about the twins and their mysteriously absent mother. Something about that story didn't quite add up, and Anne felt that, somehow, that accident was destined to have a much bigger impact on her life than she could imagine. With a mixture of determination and curiosity, Anne pushed open the doors of the pediatric ward, ready to face whatever the day and the future held. The day dragged on agonizingly slowly for Anne. Every time she passed the conference room, where hours earlier her dreams had been shattered, she felt a pang in her chest. The buzz about the new pediatric project echoed through the hallways, each mention of Michel Dupont's name like salt in an open wound. At 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes after the official end of her shift, Anne finally headed to the locker room. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. All she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and try to forget this disastrous day. As she was changing, her cell phone vibrated at the bottom of her bag. Anne hesitated. After the day she'd had, the last thing she wanted was more complications. But years of emergency room shifts had conditioned her to never ignore a call. With a resigned sigh, she retrieved the phone. Unknown number. "Hello?" Anne answered, her voice betraying her weariness. "Good evening. Is this Anne Dubois?" The voice on the other end was female, soft, yet with a note of authority that Anne couldn't help but notice. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" There was a brief pause, as if the person on the other end was gathering courage. "My name is Claire Beaumont. I'm Sophie and Marie's mother." Anne's heart leaped. The twins from the accident. 1,000 questions flooded her mind at once. Where had Claire been during the accident? Why were the girls alone in the car? How did she get Anne's number? "Miss Beaumont," Anne began, trying to keep her voice neutral. "How can I help you?" "Please, call me Claire," the voice replied, a note of emotion now evident. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for my daughters. I know that if it weren't for you..." Claire's voice faltered, and Anne could hear a muffled sob from the other end of the line. Despite her initial hesitation, Anne felt a surge of compassion. "Claire, are they all right? I got to see them briefly when we arrived at the hospital, but then..." "They're fine, thanks to you," Claire interrupted, her voice now steadier. "Sophie just had a few scrapes. Marie, well, she had a mild concussion, but the doctors say she'll make a full recovery." Anne let out a sigh of relief she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I'm so glad to hear that. But Claire, if you don't mind me asking, where were you when I arrived at the scene?" "It's complicated," Claire interrupted again, a note of caution in her voice. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I'd like to meet you in person, if possible. There's a lot I need to explain." Anne frowned, curiosity battling against her exhaustion and the day's frustrations. "I don't know, Claire. It's been a very long day and—" "Please." Claire's voice held a hint of desperation now. "Taisia, I know it's a lot to ask, especially of someone who's already done so much for my family, but I promise it will be worth your while. There are things you need to know." Something in Claire's tone gave Anne pause. There was a mystery here, something deeper than a simple car accident. "Besides," Claire continued, taking advantage of Anne's silence, "there's something about the hospital I think you should know." That caught Anne's attention. "The hospital? What do you mean?" Claire paused, as if carefully choosing her next words. "Let's just say I have a certain influence there. I'm one of the major investors in Central Hospital." Anne nearly dropped the phone. An investor? Her mind reeled with the implications. This woman, whose negligence had nearly cost her daughters their lives, held power over the place Anne had called her second home for over 2 decades. "Ms. Beaumont." "Claire," Anne corrected herself, trying to maintain her composure. "I appreciate your interest, but I really don't think it's appropriate." "Anne," Claire interrupted, her voice now charged with a palpable urgency. "I know about the meeting today. I know about the pediatric project." Anne's blood ran cold. How could she know? Claire continued, "I know you deserved that position, and I know why you didn't get it. Please, meet me. I promise I'll explain everything." Anne closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the day, of the week, of years of unrecognized dedication pressing down on her shoulders. Part of her wanted to refuse, to go home and forget all about this. But another part, the curious and determined part that made her an excellent nurse, couldn't ignore the implications of what Claire was saying. After what felt like an eternity, but was only a few seconds, Anne replied, "All right, Claire, where and when?" The relief in Claire's voice was palpable. "Thank you, Anne, truly. How about tomorrow, at 7 p.m., at the Café Lumière? It's a discreet place and perfect for a private conversation." Anne knew the place, a charming café, not far from the hospital. "I'll be there," she replied, still not entirely sure she was making the right decision. "Thank you again, Anne. See you tomorrow." And with that, Claire hung up. Anne stood in the locker room for a few minutes, phone still in hand, trying to process everything that had just happened. The day that had begun with a heroic rescue, moved through crushing disappointment, now ended with an intriguing mystery. As she left the hospital, Anne couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. Claire Beaumont, a hospital investor, mother of the twins she had saved, wanted to meet her, and apparently knew things about the pediatric project, about the injustice Anne had suffered. For a moment, Anne considered calling back and cancelling. Her life was complicated enough without adding more drama. But then she remembered the twins' faces, the fear in their eyes during the rescue, and she remembered the sting of rejection, the promotion unfairly denied. No, she would go to this meeting. She would hear what Claire had to say, because deep down, Anne knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. As she drove home, the night sky stretching above her, Anne couldn't help but feel a mixture of apprehension and excitement. Tomorrow, at 7 p.m., at the Café Lumière, she would find out what Claire Beaumont had to say. And maybe, just maybe, it would change everything. With a deep sigh, Anne turned on the radio, letting the music fill the car. Tomorrow would be a new day with new revelations, and she would be ready to face them, whatever they may be. Anne arrived at Café Lumière at 6:55 p.m., her heart beating a little faster than usual. The place was exactly as she remembered, cozy, with soft lighting and a comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee in the air. She chose a table in the corner, away from the windows, offering the privacy Claire seemed to desire. Promptly at 7 p.m., the café door opened. Anne immediately recognized Claire Beaumont, even though she had never seen her before. There was something about her posture, a blend of confidence and vulnerability, that made her stand out. Claire spotted Anne and walked towards her, a hesitant smile on her lips. "Anne Dubois?" Claire asked, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Anne stood, shaking the offered hand. "The pleasure is all mine, Claire. Please sit down." As they settled in, Anne couldn't help but notice how elegant Claire looked, even in casual clothes. There was an aura of sophistication about her that spoke of power and influence. "First of all," Claire began, her voice thick with emotion, "I can't thank you enough for what you did for Sophie and Marie. You saved their lives." Anne felt a lump forming in her throat. "I only did what anyone would have done," she replied modestly. Claire shook her head. "No, Anne, not everyone would stop. Not everyone would risk their own life to save two strangers. You're special." There was a pause, the weight of Claire's words hanging between them. Anne took the opportunity to ask the question that had been plaguing her since the accident. "Claire, where were you?" "When I arrived at the scene, the car was—" Claire sighed deeply, guilt evident in her eyes. "I was in an emergency meeting at the hospital. The girls were with their nanny, but she had to leave early. I asked my driver to pick them up. He suffered a heart attack at the wheel." The shock of the revelation hit Anne like a physical blow. "Oh my God." Claire nodded sadly. "He didn't survive. George had been with us for years. He was like family." Anne reached out, covering Claire's hand in a gesture of comfort. "I'm so sorry, Claire, truly." Claire smiled weakly, grateful for the gesture. "Thank you, Anne, but that's not why I asked to meet. Well, not entirely." She paused, as if gathering courage. "Sice, Anne, as I mentioned on the phone, I'm one of the major investors in Central Hospital. In fact, I'm the largest individual shareholder." Anne blinked, surprised. She knew Claire was influential. "But I was at the board meeting yesterday," Claire continued. "The same meeting you missed because you were saving my daughters." Anne's stomach tightened at the memory. "Claire, No, Anne, let me finish," Claire interrupted gently. "I saw what happened. I saw how Thomas and the board disregarded years of your dedication because of a delay caused by an act of heroism, no less." Anne felt tears welling up in her eyes, the injustice of the previous day still raw. "What Thomas and the others don't know," Claire continued, leaning forward, "is that I didn't approve of their decision. In fact, I vetoed it." Anne stared at Claire, confused. "But Michelle Dupont," Claire smiled, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Michelle is competent, no doubt, but she's not you, Anne. She doesn't have your experience, your compassion, your vision." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That's why I'm here. I want to offer you the leadership of the new pediatric project." Anne's jaw dropped, unable to process what she was hearing. "But how? The board already decided?" "The board works for the shareholders, Anne. And as the majority shareholder, I have the final say," Claire explained, her voice filled with confidence. "Besides, after what you did for my daughters, I trust you more than anyone else to lead a project that will affect the lives of so many children." Anne felt her head spinning with the possibilities. Everything she had worked for, dreamed of, was being offered to her on a silver platter. "But, Claire, I don't know what to say. It's an incredible offer, but you're worried about the ethical implications," Claire finished, smiling understandingly. "That's precisely why you're the right person for the job, Anne. Your integrity is unwavering." She took Anne's hand, squeezing it gently. "Look, you don't have to decide now. In fact, there's something I want you to see first. Can you meet me at the hospital tomorrow? I want you to meet Sophie and Marie properly." Anne hesitated for a moment, but the curiosity and the connection she already felt with the twins won out. "Of course, Claire, I'll be there." The next day, Anne found herself in the twins' hospital room. Sophie and Marie, now fully recovered, rushed to hug her as soon as she entered. "It's the angel lady," Sophie exclaimed, her eyes shining with admiration. "You saved us," Marie added, clinging to Anne's leg. Anne felt her heart melt. She knelt down, embracing both girls. "I'm so glad you're both okay," she said, tears in her eyes. Claire watched the scene from the doorway, a gentle smile on her face. "See, Anne, this is what your project could do. Give hope, comfort, and the best possible care to children like Sophie and Marie." Anne looked at the twins, at Claire, and back at the girls. In that moment, she knew. She knew she couldn't refuse this opportunity. It wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about making a difference, about changing lives. "Claire," Anne said, standing up and facing the woman who, in such a short time, had completely altered the course of her life. "I accept. I'll lead the pediatric project." Claire's face lit up with a radiant smile. "Oh, Anne, you don't know how much this means to me, to the hospital, to all the children you'll help." The twins, sensing the emotion of the moment, hugged Anne again. "Are you going to take care of other kids like you took care of us?" Sophie asked, looking up with hopeful eyes. Anne smiled, stroking the girl's hair. "Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what I'm going to do." As the twins climbed back into their beds, excitedly discussing how Anne was a superhero, Claire approached Anne. "Thank you, Anne. Not just for accepting the project, but for saving my daughters. You didn't just save their lives that day. You saved mine too." The two women looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. This was the beginning of something new, something important. And together, they were about to make a real difference in the world. Thomas Moreau gazed out at the city through the panoramic window of his top-floor office at Central Hospital. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, but he barely noticed the beauty of the spectacle. His mind was preoccupied with more pressing concerns. 25 years as a hospital administrator had prepared him for many challenges, but recent events left him uneasy. The decision to overlook Anne Dubois for the pediatric project still weighed heavily on his conscience. Thomas sighed, loosening the tie that felt like it was suffocating him. He picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, and then dialed a familiar number. "Hello, dear. Yes, I'm going to be late again. I'm going." No need to wait for me for dinner." Hanging up, he wondered how many times he'd had that same conversation over the years, how many missed dinners, how many forgotten anniversaries, all in the name of the hospital. A light knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, straightening in his chair. Michel Dupont, the newly appointed head of the pediatric project, entered with a confident smile. "Mr. Moreau, I have some initial ideas for the project I'd like to discuss." Thomas nodded, indicating a chair. As Michelle spoke animatedly about her proposals, Thomas couldn't help but compare her youthful energy to Anne's calming experience. Had he made a mistake? "Great ideas, Michelle," he said when she finished. "Why don't you put them in writing and bring them to me tomorrow?" After Michelle left, Thomas leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Claire Beaumont's words at the board meeting echoed in his mind. Are we really willing to disregard decades of dedication because of a single instance of tardiness? At the time, Thomas had defended the decision. It was about sending a message, he argued, about maintaining standards. But now, days later, doubts gnawed at him. Opening a drawer, Thomas pulled out a thick folder, Anne Dubois personnel file. Leafing through it, he saw years of exemplary evaluations, thank you letters from patients, innovative ideas for improving care. "What the hell have I done?" he murmured to himself. The truth was, Thomas was under immense pressure. The board demanded results, cost-cutting, efficiency. And Michelle, with her recent MBA and modern management ideas, seemed the logical choice to appease the executives. But at what cost? Thomas stood up abruptly, resolute. He needed to talk to Anne, try to make things right somehow. Making his way down to the nursing station, Thomas found the place abuzz. Nurses whispered in corners, casting curious glances in his direction. "Where's Anne Dubois?" he asked a nearby nurse. "Anne? She left early today. Something about an important meeting," the nurse replied, a gossipy tone in her voice. Thomas frowned. That wasn't like Anne. Returning to his office, Thomas was greeted by an email from Claire Beaumont. His heart quickened as he read the contents. "Thomas, I hope this message finds you well. I would like to schedule an urgent meeting to discuss the pediatric project and Anne Dubois leadership. There have been developments that we need to address immediately. Sincerely, Claire Beaumont." Thomas' blood ran cold. Claire, the hospital's largest individual shareholder, rarely involved herself directly in operational decisions. What could have changed? In the following days, Thomas observed a palpable shift in the hospital atmosphere. Rumors about the pediatric project spread like wildfire. Some said Anne would be reinstated. Others swore Michelle was bringing in a whole new team from outside. The tension was evident. Long-time employees who saw Anne as an unofficial leader barely concealed their discontent with Michelle. On the other hand, younger staff seemed excited by Michelle's promises of modernization. Thomas found himself in the middle of a minefield, trying to navigate between old loyalties and new pressures. On a particularly tense afternoon, Thomas finally managed to get a moment alone with Anne. "Anne, can we talk?" he asked, approaching her in the hallway. Anne looked at him with a mixture of surprise and caution. "Of course, Thomas, what's up?" Thomas guided her to a nearby empty room. "Anne, I made a mistake. The decision about the pediatric project—" "Thomas," Anne interrupted, her voice surprisingly calm. "What's done is done. We don't need to—" "No, Anne, please let me finish," Thomas insisted. "I didn't properly consider your years of service or your dedication. It was an error in judgment on my part, and I'd like to rectify it." Anne observed him for a moment, an unreadable expression on her face. "What exactly are you proposing, Thomas?" Thomas hesitated. What was he proposing? He didn't have the authority to reverse the board's decision. Or did he? I can talk to the board again. Maybe we can create a co-leadership position, or—" Anne raised a hand, stopping him. "Thomas, I appreciate the gesture. Truly. But I think it's a little late for that." The firmness in Anne's voice caught Thomas by surprise. There was something different about her, a newfound confidence he didn't recognize. "What do you mean?" he asked, a sense of unease growing in his stomach. Anne smiled faintly. "Let's just say things are changing, Thomas, and soon we'll all know where we stand in this new configuration." With that, she turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. "Oh, and Thomas, maybe it's time you thought about what truly matters. Not just for the hospital, but for you too." As Anne walked away, leaving Thomas alone with his thoughts, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening, something that was beyond his control. Back in his office, Thomas looked out at the city again through the window. The sun had completely set now, the city lights twinkling like earthly stars. Picking up the phone, he made a call he should have made a long time ago. "Hi, honey. Yes, it's me. You know what? I'm coming home now. How about we order that pizza you like?" "Yes, that one." "No, it's not too late. It's never too late to do the right thing." As he gathered his things to leave, Thomas knew the coming days would be challenging. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path, even if that path led him to places he never expected to go. Anne sat in her small apartment, a cup of tea cooling beside her. Her eyes wandered around the room, pausing on photos from her career at Central Hospital. Her graduation, her first day as head nurse, precious moments with patients who had touched her life. 23 years of memories, challenges, and triumphs. Claire Beaumont's offer hung over her mind like a charged cloud, about to unleash a storm of change. Leading the new pediatric project was everything Anne had ever dreamed of. A chance to make a real difference, to implement ideas that had been brewing in her mind for years. But at what cost? Anne picked up her phone, rereading the message Thomas had sent her earlier. "Anne, we need to talk urgently. There are things you need to know before you make any decisions. Please meet me tomorrow before your shift." Thomas. The urgency in the message intrigued her. What could Thomas possibly know that would change her perspective? Sighing, Anne stood up and walked to the window. The city glittered outside, thousands of lives following their courses, oblivious to the dilemma consuming her. How many of those lives could she positively impact if she accepted Claire's offer? But then there was the question of loyalty. Central Hospital wasn't just her workplace, it was her second home, her chosen family. The nurses she had trained, the doctors she had collaborated with, the patients who trusted her. Would she be betraying them all by accepting a promotion that came from outside the established system? Sophie and Marie's faces flashed in her mind. Those little lives she had saved, who now looked at her with such admiration. Wasn't it for children like them that she had become a nurse in the first place? The night passed in a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. When the sun rose, Anne was still unsure of her decision. Arriving at the hospital earlier than usual, Anne found Thomas waiting for her at the entrance to the nursing ward. His face was tense, dark circles under his eyes testifying to a sleepless night. "Anne, thank you for coming," he said, guiding her towards an empty conference room. "There's something you need to know about Claire Beaumont and this new project." Anne sat down, watching Thomas warily. "What is it, Thomas?" "What could be so serious?" Thomas ran a hand through his greying hair, a gesture Anne recognized as a sign of extreme stress. "Claire isn't just an investor, Anne. She's trying to take over the hospital." Anne blinked, taken aback. What? What do you mean?" "Over the past few months, she's been quietly buying up more and more shares. Now, with this pediatric project, she's making her final move," Thomas explained, his voice low and urgent. "If she gets to implement this project her way, she'll have enough influence to reshape the entire hospital according to her vision." "And that's bad?" Anne asked, confused. "Claire seems to have the best intentions." Thomas shook his head vehemently. "Intentions aren't enough, Anne. Claire is a businesswoman, not a healthcare professional. She sees numbers, not patients. If she takes over, who knows what changes she'll make? Staff cuts, outsourcing of services, prioritizing profits over care." Anne felt her stomach churn. The image she had formed of Claire, the grateful mother, the compassionate visionary, began to crack around the edges. "Why are you telling me this, Thomas?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Thomas looked her in the eye, his expression a mixture of regret and determination. "Because I made a mistake, Anne, by not choosing you to lead the project initially, but now I need you to refuse Claire's offer. If you accept, you'll be giving her the final push she needs." Anne sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing everything. Part of her wanted to believe Thomas, to trust the man who had been her mentor for so many years, but another part remembered the compassion in Claire's eyes, the connection she had felt with Sophie and Marie. "What if," Anne began slowly, "what if I could accept Claire's offer, but use my position to ensure the changes are made the right way, to protect what truly matters at the hospital?" Thomas looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Yanta, that's incredibly risky. You'd be swimming with sharks. Claire is powerful and ruthless in business." "But she's not a healthcare professional," Anne countered, a new resolve rising in her voice. "I am. And I know this hospital, its patients and its staff better than any investor ever could." Thomas opened his mouth to argue, but was interrupted by the ringing of his phone. Glancing at the screen, he paled. "It's Claire. She's calling an emergency board meeting now." Anne stood up, a surprising calmness washing over her. "Then we better go." Minutes later, Anne found herself standing before the hospital board. Familiar and unfamiliar faces watched her with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Claire Beaumont sat at the head of the table, her gaze fixed on Anne. "Ms. Dubois," Claire began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "I understand you've been informed of the offer to lead the new pediatric project. Before we proceed with any other business, I'd like to know your decision." Anne felt every eye in the room upon her. Thomas Hickey, standing beside her, seemed to be holding his breath. This was the moment, the crossroads that would define not only her future, but potentially the future of the entire hospital. Taking a deep breath, Anne stepped forward. "Mrs. Beaumont, members of the board, I accept the offer." A murmur rippled through the room. Thomas closed his eyes, defeated. But Anne wasn't finished. "However," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "I accept with one condition. I want full transparency and involvement in all decisions that affect patient care, not just in the pediatric ward, but throughout the entire hospital." Claire raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's quite bold, Mrs. Dubois." "It may be," Anne agreed, "but it's necessary. This hospital isn't just a business. It's a place of healing, of hope. Every decision we make affects real lives. If I'm going to lead this project, I need to know I'm doing it the right way, for the right reasons." The silence that followed was deafening. Anne could feel the weight of her statement hanging in the air, challenging everyone in the room to question her. Finally, to everyone's surprise, Claire smiled. "That's precisely why I wanted you, Anne. Your passion, your integrity, I accept your condition." The room erupted in heated discussions. Some board members protested, others applauded Anne's audacity. Thomas stared at her with a mixture of pride and concern, but Anne stood firm, her eyes locked on Claire. She knew she was stepping into uncharted, potentially dangerous waters. But she also knew that this was her chance to make a real difference, to protect what truly mattered at Central Hospital. As the meeting continued around her, Anne felt a surge of determination wash over her. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and conflicts, but she was ready. Ready to fight, to lead, to change. The crossroads had been crossed. Now, it was time to forge the new path. Anne's office, once a small cubicle in the nursing ward, was now a spacious room overlooking the hospital garden. Stacks of documents, architectural plans, and budget proposals covered every available surface. Anne ran her fingers through her hair, a cold cup of coffee forgotten beside her. 2 weeks had passed since her audacious acceptance of the pediatric project leadership, and the reality of her new position was starting to sink in. Each day brought fresh challenges, crucial decisions, and a never-ending to-do list. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," Anne called, straightening in her chair. Michelle Dupont, the nurse who had originally been chosen to lead the project, entered hesitantly. "Anne, I brought the reports you requested on the current pediatric ward protocols," Michelle said, placing a folder on the already cluttered desk. Anne looked at the young nurse, noticing the unease in her eyes. "Michelle, please sit down for a moment," Michelle complied, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I know this situation isn't easy for you," Anne began gently. "I want you to know that I truly value your ideas and experience. In fact, I was hoping we could work together on this project. Your perspective would be invaluable." Michelle's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" "I thought, well, after everything that happened," Anne smiled, extending her hand across the desk. "Michelle, this project isn't about me or you. It's about the children we're going to help. And to do that in the best possible way, I need the best team by my side. That includes you." The relief on Michelle's face was palpable. "Thank you, Anne. I would love to be a part of it." As Michelle left, Anne felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Building bridges would be crucial for the project's success. Across town, in a luxurious penthouse apartment, Claire Beaumont stared at her own stack of documents. Financial reports, market projections, and emails from other investors filled her computer screen. "Mummy," a small voice called. Claire turned to see Sophie standing in the doorway of her office, clutching a teddy bear. "What is it, sweetheart?" Claire asked, opening her arms to her daughter. Sophie rushed into the embrace, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "I had another bad dream," she murmured. Claire closed her eyes, guilt and worry flooding her heart. Since the accident, the twins had been having trouble sleeping, haunted by memories of the trauma. "It's all right now, my love," Claire whispered, stroking Sophie's hair. "You're safe." A sharp cry from the next room made Claire stand up abruptly, Sophie still in her arms. Rushing into Marie's bedroom, she found her other daughter sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. "The car, the fire," Marie sobbed. Claire sat on the bed, pulling Marie close and embracing both girls. "Shh, it's okay. Mommy's here. You're both safe." As she comforted her daughters, Claire couldn't help but think of Anne, the nurse who had saved her girls, who was now leading a project that could help countless other children. Claire knew she had made the right choice, but the weight of her responsibilities as a mother, as an investor, as the driving force behind the project, had never felt so heavy. Back at the hospital, Anne faced her first major hurdle. Thomas had called an emergency meeting with the project team. "Costs are exploding," Thomas explained, his voice tense. "The budget we initially approved won't be enough." Anne felt her stomach sink. "How much are we over?" "Almost 30%, Thomas replied, passing around a detailed spreadsheet. "In construction materials have gone up in price, and the specifications for the new medical equipment are more expensive than we anticipated." The room fell silent, the weight of the news hanging over everyone. Anne took a deep breath, her mind racing. "Okay, let's think about this logically. First, we need to review every single item in the budget. Maybe there are areas where we can cut costs without compromising quality. Michelle timidly raised her hand. I have an idea. What if we approached some of our regular suppliers, explained the project, see if they'd be willing to offer discounts in exchange for long-term contracts? Anne smiled, grateful for the contribution. Excellent idea, Michelle. Would you be willing to lead that initiative? The young nurse nodded, energized by the responsibility. Thomas, Anne continued, we need to be transparent with Claire and the board about this. The sooner we address the issue, the better. Thomas seemed hesitant. Anne, are you sure? You sure? This could shake their confidence in the project, or it could show that we're being proactive and responsible, Anne argued. Trust me, Thomas, honesty is our best policy here. As the meeting continued, discussing strategies and solutions, Anne couldn't help but feel a mixture of apprehension and determination. This was just the first of many challenges they would face, she knew, but it was also an opportunity to prove the value of her leadership, to show that her vision for the project was sound and achievable. That evening, as the hospital quieted down for the night shift, Anne took one last walk through the existing pediatric ward. Children slept peacefully, exhausted parents dozed in uncomfortable chairs, and nurses moved silently, checking monitors and adjusting IVs. Standing in the hallway, Anne closed her eyes for a moment, letting the familiar sounds and smells wash over her. This was why she had accepted the challenge, not for personal ambition or financial gain, but for the chance to improve the lives of these vulnerable children and families. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. A message from Claire. Anne, we need to talk about the project tomorrow. Some complications have arisen. Can we meet before your morning meeting? Anne felt a pang of worry but took a deep breath, pushing the fear aside. Whatever the new challenge was, she would face it head-on, because now, more than ever, she knew she was on the right path. With one last look at the ward, Anne turned to leave, ready to face whatever tomorrow held. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and unexpected twists and turns. But with each step, each decision, each challenge overcome, she was building something greater than herself, a legacy of care, compassion, and hope for generations to come. The sun had barely risen when Anne arrived at Central Hospital that morning. The air was thick with anticipation and a touch of nervous energy. Today was the day, the official grand opening of the new pediatric wing. Months of planning, sleepless nights, and countless hurdles had led to this moment. Anne adjusted her carefully chosen blazer, took a deep breath, and entered the building. The lobby was a whirlwind of activity. Staff members put the finishing touches on decorations, journalists adjusted their cameras, and a group of dignitaries, including the mayor, chatted quietly near the entrance. Anne, Claire's voice called out. The investor approached quickly, her face a mixture of excitement and tension. We have a problem. Anne's heart skipped a beat. What is it? Claire pulled her aside to a quieter corner. Security found a flaw in the new wing's access control system. Apparently, there's a glitch that could allow unauthorized access to restricted areas. Anne felt a chill run down her spine. A security breach on this day of all days. How much time do we have until the ceremony? Claire glanced at her watch. 2 hours. Right, Anne nodded, her mind already working on solutions. Gather the IT and security teams in the conference room in 5 minutes. I'll get Thomas. As Claire hurried off to make the necessary calls, Anne rushed to Thomas's office. The hospital director was already there, reviewing his speech for the ceremony. Thomas, we have an emergency. Anne explained the situation quickly. Thomas's eyes widened with concern. Good heavens, Anne, if this leaks to the press. It won't, Anne stated with more confidence than she felt. We'll fix it. Come on, the team is meeting now. In the conference room, a tense group of IT technicians, security guards, and administrators huddled around the table. Claire stood, explaining the situation in detail. Okay, everyone. Anne took charge, her voice firm and decisive. We have less than 2 hours to fix this. What are our options? The head of the IT team, a man named Mark, spoke first. We can try an emergency patch on the system, but there's no way to fully test it in such a short time. What if we temporarily disable the electronic system? One of the guards suggested. Go back to manual control for today. Claire shook her head. So that would delay the entire check-in and movement process. With so many visitors today, it would be chaos. Anne pondered for a moment. What if we do both? Implement the emergency patch, but also increase physical security at key points as an extra precaution. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone considered the proposal. It might work, Mark agreed slowly. But we'll need all hands on deck. Make it happen, Anne ordered. Claire, I need you to distract the guests and the press. Make up a story, an impromptu tour, anything to buy us time. Claire nodded, already heading out of the room to put the plan into action. The next 90 minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Anne coordinated the teams, making quick decisions and troubleshooting problems as they arose. Thomas stayed by her side, offering support and using his authority when necessary to expedite processes. With only 10 minutes to spare, Mark reappeared, sweat dripping from his brow. It's done. The patch is installed, and the extra guards are in position. Anne let out a sigh of relief. Great work, everyone. Now, let's make this grand opening happen. She barely had time to smooth her hair and touch up her makeup before being called to the makeshift stage in the lobby. The crowd of guests, journalists, and staff members buzzed with anticipation. Claire opened the event with a heartfelt speech about the importance of quality pediatric care. Then Thomas spoke about the hospital's history and its vision for the future. Finally, it was Anne's turn. She stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of all eyes upon her. Good morning, everyone, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. Today is not just about the opening of a new physical space. It's about a renewed commitment to our children, our families, and our community. As Anne spoke passionately about the new wing's features and the benefits it would bring to patients, she noticed a strange movement at the back of the room. A middle-aged man dressed in a janitor's uniform was moving furtively towards a door marked Restricted Access. Anne's heart pounded. The security system had the patch failed. Without missing a beat in her speech, she made eye contact with Claire, who was standing at the side of the stage, and discreetly indicated the man with a slight nod. Claire understood immediately. With a subtle gesture, she alerted the nearby security guards and continued speaking, determined not to alarm the crowd. And it is with great pride that I officially declare the new Central Hospital Pediatric Wing open. The audience erupted in enthusiastic applause. At that very moment, a shout cut through the air. Hey! Stop right there! All eyes turned to the back of the room, where the guards had intercepted the suspicious man. He tried to flee, knocking over a nearby table with a crash that echoed through the lobby. Panic threatened to spread through the crowd, but Anne acted swiftly. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. She spoke into the microphone, her voice firm and reassuring. Our security team is handling the situation. Please stay where you are. Claire and Thomas rushed to help control the situation, while Anne continued to calm the crowd from the stage. Minutes later, which felt like hours, the man was apprehended and discreetly removed. Claire returned to the stage, whispering quickly to Anne, "It's all under control. It was an undercover journalist trying to get an exclusive story." Anne nodded, feeling relief wash over her. Turning back to the microphone, she smiled at the still unsettled crowd. "Well, it seems we had a little extra excitement at our ceremony today," she quipped, eliciting a few nervous chuckles. "But if this incident proves anything, it's the effectiveness of our new security team. The safety of our patients, especially our children, is and always will be our #1 priority." The tension in the room visibly eased. Anne continued, "Now, how about that tour of the new wing I promised?" As she led the group into the new pediatric wing, Anne exchanged relieved glances with Claire and Thomas. They had overcome yet another obstacle together. And while the grand opening day hadn't gone exactly as planned, it had showcased the resilience and teamwork that would be essential for the project's continued success. The new wing was officially open, and with it, a new chapter in Central Hospital's history had begun. 3 weeks had passed since the tumultuous grand opening of the new pediatric wing. Things finally seemed to be settling down, and Anne was starting to feel like she was finding her rhythm in the new position. That Wednesday morning, she was making her usual rounds, checking on patients and chatting with the staff. Then the alarm sounded. Code Blue, Pediatric Wing, Room 305. The voice announced over the intercom. Anne's heart leaped into her throat. Room 305, that was where Lily, a 7-year-old girl with a complex heart condition, was staying. Anne ran, arriving at the room seconds after the emergency team. The scene was chaotic. Lily was in cardiac arrest, her pale skin a stark contrast against the white sheets. The medical team worked frantically, performing CPR and preparing the defibrillator. What happened? Anne asked Dr. Martins, the chief pediatric cardiologist. Severe arrhythmia, he replied between chest compressions. She's not responding to standard treatment. Anne glanced at the monitors, her mind racing. She knew Lily was on the waiting list for a new experimental treatment, but the procedure hadn't been fully approved for use at the hospital yet. Tired Dr. Martins, Anne said, a risky idea forming in her mind. What if we used the Theta protocol? The doctor looked at her, shocked. Anne, that procedure isn't approved yet. It's too risky. Riskier than letting her die, Anne countered. I know the risks, Gal, but I also know it's Lily's best chance. Dr. Martins hesitated for a moment, then nodded. So okay, let's do it. Prepare the Theta protocol. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of intense activity. Anne watched, her heart pounding, as the team administered the experimental treatment. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the heart monitor flickered back to life. We have a rhythm, someone shouted. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Lily was stable, for now. As the team continued to monitor Lily closely, Anne stepped out of the room, her legs shaking with adrenaline. She barely had time to process what had just happened when she saw Claire Beaumont walking briskly towards her, followed by Thomas. Anne, what on earth happened in there? Claire demanded, her face a mask of worry and irritation. I've just been informed that you authorized an unapproved procedure on a patient. Anne straightened her shoulders, bracing herself for the confrontation. Claire, it was an emergency. Lily would have died if we hadn't acted. Do you have any idea the legal risks you've just created for the hospital? Claire retorted. If anything goes wrong, we could face a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And if we had done nothing, a child would have died, Anne replied, her voice firm. I thought the well-being of our patients was our #1 priority. Claire ran a hand through her hair, clearly frustrated. Of course it is, Anne, but we can't just disregard protocols and procedures. There are reasons why these approvals exist. The tension between the two women was palpable. Thomas, who had remained silent until now, finally intervened. Ladies, please, he said, his voice calm but firm. Let's discuss this in my office, away from prying ears. Anne and Claire followed Thomas to his office, the silence between them heavy with unresolved tension. Once inside, Thomas closed the door and turned to face them. Okay, let's approach this logically, he began. Anne, I understand your decision in the heat of the moment, but Claire is right about the legal risks. Claire, you need to understand that sometimes, in medicine, difficult decisions have to be made quickly. He paused, looking from one woman to the other. What we need now is to find a middle ground. How can we protect the hospital legally while still allowing our doctors to make crucial decisions in emergencies? Anne was the first to speak. What if we create a rapid review committee? A group of experts who can be convened within minutes to assess and approve non-standard emergency procedures. Claire considered the idea for a moment. That could work. It would add a layer of legal protection, but still allow for flexibility in life or death situations. Thomas nodded in agreement. Good idea, Anne. You can lead the formation of this committee. Claire, I'd like you to work with our legal team to establish the legal parameters. Both women agreed, the tension between them easing slightly. Now, Thomas continued, as for the current situation with Lily. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Dr. Martins entered, looking exhausted but relieved. Excuse the interruption, he said. I just wanted to let you know that Lily is stable. The procedure was a success. She's responding well and her vital signs are improving every hour. Anne couldn't help but smile with relief. Claire, on the other hand, seemed torn between relief and continued concern. "That's wonderful news, Doctor," Thomas replied. "Please keep us updated on her progress." After Dr. Martins left, the office fell silent for a moment. "Well," Claire finally spoke, "it seems your risky decision paid off this time, Anne, but we still need to be cautious moving forward." Anne nodded. "I agree, and I promise to work closely with you and the legal team to ensure we're protected in the future." Thomas smiled, pleased with the outcome. "Good. Now let's focus on managing the fallout from this situation. Anne, prepare a detailed report on the incident and the outcome. Claire, work with our PR team to prepare a statement in case this leaks to the press." As they left the office, Anne and Claire exchanged glances. There was a newfound mutual respect there, born from the fire of the crisis they had just faced together. In the days that followed, the hospital buzzed with rumors about the miracle in room 305. Lily's story spread, bringing both praise and concern. Some saw Anne as a hero who wasn't afraid to break the rules to save lives. Others criticized her for her recklessness. Anne knew the road ahead would be challenging. Balancing the needs of her patients with the administrative and legal realities of the hospital would be a constant struggle. But looking at Lily, now smiling and recovering in her hospital bed, Anne knew she had made the right choice. The crisis had passed, but its ripples would continue to spread through the hospital for a long time to come. And Anne was determined to navigate those turbulent waters with the same courage and compassion that had brought her this far. Anne was organizing some files in her office when she heard a hesitant knock on the door. Looking up, she saw Michelle, the young nurse, standing in the doorway with a worried expression. "Michelle, is everything all right?" Anne asked, gesturing for her to come in. Michelle closed the door behind her and approached Anne's desk, holding a manila envelope. "Anne, I found something I think you need to see." Intrigued, Anne took the envelope Michelle offered. Inside, there was a police report and some photographs. As Anne examined the documents, her face paled. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michelle swallowed hard. "My brother is a police officer. He was investigating an unrelated case and stumbled across this information. When I mentioned the twins' accident to him, he made the connection." Anne looked at the photos of the accident scene again. Something didn't seem right. The skid marks, the position of the car. It all suggested that it hadn't been a simple accident. "Michelle, this is very serious. Have you told anyone else?" The young nurse shook her head. "No, I came straight to you. I thought you should be the first to know." Anne nodded, grateful for Michelle's discretion. "Thank you for bringing this to me. Please don't mention this to anyone else for now." After Michelle left, Anne sat for a long time, contemplating the implications of what she had just discovered. If the twins' accident wasn't an accident, what really happened that day? Determined to uncover the truth, Anne decided to conduct her own discreet investigation. In the days that followed, she used every spare moment to follow leads, make calls, and gather more information. A week later, Anne had accumulated enough evidence to confirm her suspicions. The twins' accident had been deliberately orchestrated. But why and who was behind it? The answer came from an unexpected source. A former employee of Claire's, whom Anne tracked down after days of searching, finally agreed to talk to her. Mrs. Beaumont had a business partner, the man revealed, nervously. Robert Gagnon. They had a serious falling out a few months before the accident. Gagnon swore revenge. Anne's heart raced. She remembered Claire briefly mentioning a former business partner, but she never imagined the situation was so serious. Armed with this new information, Anne knew she needed to confront Claire. She arranged an urgent meeting, asking Claire to meet her at the park near the hospital. When Claire arrived, Anne could see the tension in her shoulders, as if she already knew something was wrong. "Anne, what's so urgent?" Claire asked, sitting down on the bench beside her. Anne took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Claire, I've discovered something about the twins, an accident. Something you didn't tell me." Claire's face paled visibly. "What are you talking about?" "The accident wasn't an accident, was it?" Anne asked directly. "It was planned by Robert Gagnon." Claire was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on some distant point. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Kai, how did you find out?" Anne briefly explained her investigation, omitting the names of Michelle and her brother to protect them. Claire let out a heavy sigh. "You're right. It wasn't an accident. Robert, he wanted to destroy me. He thought that if something happened to the girls, I would lose everything." "Why didn't you tell me before?" Anne asked, a mixture of compassion and frustration in her voice. "I was afraid," Claire admitted. "Afraid that if the truth came out, people would think I was somehow involved. That I might lose my daughters, my position, everything." Anne processed the information, trying to reconcile the image she had of Claire with this new revelation. "But why would Robert do something so extreme?" Claire closed her eyes, as if the memory was too painful. "Robert and I were more than just business partners. We had an affair. When I ended it, he didn't take it well. He became obsessed, vengeful." The revelation hit Anne like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, so many things started to make sense. Claire's interest in the hospital, her insistence on bringing Anne onto the project. "You brought me onto the project because of this. To keep me close in case the truth came out?" Anne asked, feeling betrayed. "In the beginning, yes," Claire admitted, tears in her eyes. "But Anne, you have to believe me. Over time, I saw how competent you were, how compassionate. I realized you were exactly what the hospital needed, regardless of the past." Anne remained silent, trying to process everything. Part of her wanted to yell at Claire, feeling used and manipulated, but another part understood the fear and desperation that must have motivated Claire's actions. "What happened to Robert?" Anne finally asked. "He's in jail," Claire replied. "I managed to gather enough evidence to incriminate him for the attempt on the girls' lives, but I was afraid to make it public, to expose the girls to more trauma." Anne nodded slowly, understanding the complexity of the situation. "Claire, I understand why you hid this, but lying and manipulating, that can't continue." Claire looked at Anne, her eyes pleading for understanding. "What are you going to do now?" Anne took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision on her shoulders. "I don't know, Claire. I need time to think. But one thing is certain. We can't continue as if nothing happened. We need to be honest with each other and with the hospital from now on." The two women sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the revelations hanging between them. The future of the project, of the hospital, and of their professional relationship was now on uncertain ground. Anne knew that the decisions she made from this point forward would have far-reaching repercussions, but one thing was clear. The truth, however painful, was the only way forward. Anne's office was steeped in a tense silence. Claire sat across from her, hands trembling slightly as she held an untouched cup of coffee. Anne watched the woman who, in a few short months, had become her mentor, ally, and now a moral enigma. "I think I owe you the full truth, Anne," Claire began, her voice barely a whisper. "Not just about the accident, but about everything that led to it." Anne nodded silently, bracing herself. Claire closed her eyes, delving into painful memories. Flashback 5 years ago. Claire Beaumont, a young and ambitious entrepreneur, was celebrating the opening of her first private health clinic. Beside her stood Robert Gagnon, her business partner and secret lover. "To the future, darling," Robert murmured, raising his glass. "Soon we'll have a network of clinics across the country." Claire smiled, intoxicated by success and the promise of a bright future. Present. "Robert and I were unstoppable," Claire continued. "In 3 years, we'd expanded to 5 clinics. But then," flashback 2 years ago. "You can't do this, Claire," Robert shouted, throwing papers across the room. "We're selling to a large corporation. It goes against everything we've built." Claire stood firm. "It's the best decision for the business, Robert. We can expand faster, help more people." "No," Robert hissed. "It's the best decision for you. It's always been about you, hasn't it?" Present, Claire wiped away a lone tear. I didn't realize at the time how obsessed Robert was, not just with the business, Yonax, but with me. When I ended our relationship and went ahead with the sale, something in him snapped. Anne felt a shiver run down her spine. "And that's when he started planning his revenge," Claire nodded sadly. He began with small acts of sabotage, leaking information to competitors, harassing key employees. But then, her voice faltered, and Anne realized they were approaching the crux of the matter. He found out about the twins, Claire continued, her voice barely audible. Daughters from a brief relationship I had after leaving him. To Robert, it was the final proof that I had betrayed him in every way. Anne's heart clenched. So he orchestrated the accident. Yes, Claire confirmed, finally meeting Anne's eyes. But I had suspicions. I received veiled threats, noticed strange people following us. I should have done more, should have protected my daughters better. The silence that followed was deafening. Anne wrestled internally with the ethical implications of everything she had heard. Claire wasn't directly responsible for the accident, but her subsequent concealment and manipulation were deeply troubling. Claire, Anne finally spoke, her voice firm but compassionate. I understand why you hid this, but now that I know, I can't simply ignore it. We have ethical responsibilities to the hospital, the patients, the staff. Claire nodded, resigned. I know, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. But Anne, please think of the girls. They've already been through so much. Before Anne could respond, there was an urgent knock on the door. Thomas entered, his face a mask of concern. Anne, Claire, we have a problem, he announced without preamble. Somehow, rumors about the twins' accident and a possible cover-up are spreading through the hospital. Anne's blood ran cold. How could this have leaked so quickly? Claire paled visibly. Oh, God, it's worse than I feared. Thomas looked from one woman to the other, bewildered. Do you know what this is about? Please tell me this is just a malicious rumor. Anne exchanged a meaningful look with Claire before turning to Thomas. It's not just a rumor, Thomas, but it's complicated. We need to act quickly to control the situation. In the hospital corridors, the tension was palpable. Groups of staff whispered in corners, falling silent abruptly when someone from administration passed by. Patients cast curious and worried glances. Anne, Claire, and Thomas called an emergency meeting with the public relations team and key department heads. Ladies and gentlemen, Thomas began, his voice grave, we are facing a potential PR crisis. We need transparency, but also care in protecting the privacy of those involved and the reputation of the hospital. As the meeting progressed, discussing communication strategies and crisis management, Anne couldn't help but reflect on the ethical dilemma she faced. On one hand, there was the need for transparency and accountability. The public and the hospital staff deserved to know the truth. On the other hand, there were the twins to consider, two innocent children who could be deeply affected if all the details came to light. Claire, sensing Anne's internal conflict, approached her during a short break. Anne, she said softly, I know I've put you in an impossible position. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. You've proven yourself to be not only an exceptional leader, but also a person of unwavering integrity. Anne looked at Claire, seeing for the first time the genuine vulnerability and remorse in the woman's eyes. Thank you, Claire, Anne replied. It won't be an easy decision, but I promise I'll do what's best for everyone involved, the hospital, the staff, the patients, and yes, your daughters too. As the meeting resumed, Anne knew the next few hours and days would be crucial. How they navigated this crisis would define not only the future of the hospital, but also test the limits of her own ethics and compassion. With a deep breath, Anne prepared to face one of the greatest challenges of her career and her life. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was determined to move forward with integrity, compassion, and the courage to do what was right, no matter the cost. The auditorium at Central Hospital was packed. Journalists, staff, board members, and even a few patients crowded in, anxiously awaiting the announcement that promised to clarify the rumors that had been swirling around the institution for the past few weeks. Anne stepped onto the stage, followed by Claire and Thomas. The silence that fell over the room was almost palpable. Good afternoon, everyone, Anne began, her voice steady but compassionate. We are here today to address the rumors that have circulated recently and to share some difficult truths. In the next few minutes, Anne, with Claire's consent, revealed the truth about the twins' accident. She carefully explained the circumstances. Robert Gagnon's involvement, and Claire's subsequent actions, being mindful to protect the children's privacy as much as possible. The audience's reaction ranged from shock to outrage, with murmurs rippling through the crowd as the story unfolded. Claire then stepped up to the microphone, visibly shaken but resolute. "Yes, I made grave mistakes," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Mistakes for which I am prepared to face the legal and professional consequences. I apologize to everyone who has been affected by my actions and omissions." Thomas spoke next, announcing a series of changes in the hospital's administration. "In light of these events, we will be implementing new transparency and ethics policies. Furthermore, Mrs. Beaumont has agreed to temporarily step down from the board while an independent investigation is conducted." In the days that followed, the hospital became the center of a media storm. Claire, true to her word, cooperated fully with the authorities, providing all the information she had about Robert Gagnon's actions. Anne, meanwhile, threw herself into the task of restoring trust in the hospital. She spearheaded the creation of a new ethics committee, composed of medical professionals, administrators, and even community representatives. "Our goal," Anne explained during the committee's first meeting, "is not just to react to crises, but to create a culture of integrity that permeates every aspect of our operations." One of the committee's first initiatives was to establish an anonymous reporting channel, where staff and patients could raise ethical concerns without fear of retaliation. Thomas, inspired by Anne's courage in facing the truth head-on, began implementing significant changes in the hospital's administrative structure. He introduced regular ethical performance reviews for all levels of leadership and initiated a medical ethics training program for all employees. "That we can't change the past," Thomas declared during a staff meeting, "but we can certainly shape our future. Let's make this hospital a model of excellence not only in medical care, but also in integrity." Meanwhile, in a surprising and heartwarming gesture, Sophie and Marie, the twins at the center of the controversy, expressed a desire to do something positive with their traumatic experience. With Anne's support and the careful guidance of child therapists, the girls launched a traffic safety awareness campaign aimed at children. "Sign if we can help prevent other children from going through what we went through," Sophie said during the campaign launch, her voice small but determined. "Then something good will have come from all of this." The campaign, which included school visits and a children's book about traffic safety, quickly gained national attention, bringing a positive focus to the hospital amidst the controversy. Claire, stepping away from her hospital responsibilities, dedicated herself fully to supporting her daughters and the campaign. She also began therapy, seeking to understand and correct the patterns of behavior that led her to make ethically questionable decisions. "I'm learning every day," Claire confessed to Anne during one of their occasional meetings, "about myself, about the true meaning of leadership and responsibility. I just hope that one day I can redeem myself in the eyes of everyone, especially my daughters." Anne, observing Claire's progress, felt a mixture of pride and caution. "Redemption is a journey, Claire," she replied gently. "The important thing is that you've taken the first step." As the weeks turned into months, Central Hospital began to emerge from the crisis stronger and more ethical than ever. The new protocols and policies implemented by Anne and Thomas not only restored public trust, but also drew praise from the wider medical community. The Pediatric Wing Project, temporarily overshadowed by the controversy, gained new momentum. Anne, with the full support of Thomas and the new board, expanded the project's scope to include a research center for pediatric medical ethics. "We want this project to be more than just a new wing," Anne explained during a press conference, "and we want it to be a beacon of hope and integrity, showcasing what's possible when we place ethics and patient care at the heart of everything we do." On a quiet afternoon, months after the initial revelation, Anne found herself back in the park near the hospital, the same spot where Claire had confessed the truth. This time she wasn't alone. Sophie and Marie were running and laughing on the grass, their joyful sounds echoing in the air. Claire joined Anne on the bench, watching her daughters with a mixture of love and regret. "They're resilient," Anne commented softly. Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. "They are my inspiration to be better every day." The two women sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on the turbulent journey they had traveled. "Anne," Claire finally spoke, "I can never thank you enough, not just for saving my daughters that day, but for saving me from myself, for showing me that it's possible to face the truth and still find a way forward." Anne smiled, feeling the weight of Claire's words. "We all make mistakes, Claire. The important thing is how we choose to redeem ourselves." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Anne felt a surge of hope. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in a long time, she was truly optimistic about the future, of the hospital, of the twins, and of everyone involved in this extraordinary journey of redemption. Morning sunlight streamed into the newly renovated atrium of Central Hospital, illuminating a banner that read, "Annual Conference on Ethics and Patient Safety." Anne Dubois, now director of the Ethics and Patient Safety Program, watched with a mixture of pride and nostalgia as attendees arrived. A year had passed since the tumultuous revelation that had shaken the hospital to its core, a year of changes, challenges, and, surprisingly, extraordinary growth. Anne adjusted her name tag and smiled as she saw a familiar face approaching. "Thomas, so good to see you," she greeted the now-retired hospital director warmly. Thomas, looking more relaxed than Anne had ever seen him, returned the smile. "Wouldn't miss this for the world, Anne. It's incredible to see how far we've come in just 1 year." Together, they watched the crowd. Healthcare professionals from across the country had come to learn about the innovative ethical and safety practices implemented at Central Hospital. "For who would have thought our crisis would become a model for others to follow?" Thomas mused. Anne nodded, remembering the challenging months that followed the revelation. The program she now directed was born out of the urgent need to restore trust and establish new standards of integrity. "Anne," a cheerful voice interrupted their thoughts. Sophie and Marie, now 9 years old, rushed towards her, followed closely by Claire. The twins, wearing T-shirts with the logo of their child safety campaign, hugged Anne enthusiastically. "We're so excited for our presentation," Sophie exclaimed. "We're going to tell everyone about our campaign in schools," Marie added. Anne's heart swelled with joy at seeing the girls' transformation. The trauma of the accident had become a driving force for positive change. Claire approached, her face showing signs of weariness, but also a newfound peace. After serving a reduced sentence for her cooperation, she had dedicated the past few months to working with corporate responsibility organizations. "Thank you for inviting us, Anne," Claire said softly. "It means a lot to be here today." Anne gently squeezed Claire's shoulder. "You're a part of this story as much as any of us. Your journey is a powerful testament to redemption and change." The auditorium was filled to capacity when Anne took the stage to welcome the attendees. Looking out at the audience, she saw familiar and new faces, all united by the desire to do better, to be better. "Welcome to our annual conference on ethics and patient safety," Anne began. "A year ago, our hospital faced a crisis that could have destroyed us. Instead, we chose to embrace it as an opportunity for transformation." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Today, we celebrate not only our accomplishments, but also the journey that brought us here. A journey of honesty, courage, and above all, compassion." Throughout the day, panels and presentations highlighted the changes implemented at the hospital. The new ethics reporting system, the enhanced safety protocols, the medical ethics training program, each initiative a brick in the rebuilding of the hospital's integrity. One of the most touching moments came when Sophie and Marie took the stage. With surprising confidence for their age, they shared their experience and how they turned it into a mission for child safety. "We learned that even bad things can lead to good things," Sophie said, her voice clear and strong. "And that we can all make a difference, no matter how small we are," Marie finished. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium as the girls finished their presentation. As the day drew to a close, Anne found a moment of quiet reflection. Standing near a window, she watched the sun setting over the city. "A penny for your thoughts," Claire's voice startled her. Anne smiled. "Just reflecting on how we got here, it all started with a simple act of stopping to help at an accident." Claire nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You saved more than just my daughters that day, Anne. You started a ripple effect that touched so many lives. Before Anne could respond, Thomas joined them, followed by the twins. How about a picture to commemorate the occasion? He suggested, holding up a camera. They gathered together, genuine smiles gracing their faces. The flash went off, capturing a moment of unity that, a year ago, would have seemed impossible. Later, during the closing reception, Anne surveyed the room filled with people chatting animatedly, exchanging ideas and inspiration. Thomas raised his glass, catching everyone's attention. "A toast," he announced, "to second chances, to new beginnings, and to the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard." A chorus of cheers echoed through the room. Anne felt a wave of emotion wash over her. From a simple act of compassion on a roadside to this celebration of ethics, safety, and renewal, the journey had been extraordinary. As the evening progressed, Anne knew this wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more opportunities for growth and change. But now, armed with the lessons of the past and a clear vision for the future, they were ready to face anything. Central Hospital was no longer just a place of physical healing, but a beacon of integrity, compassion, and hope. And Anne, along with everyone there, was committed to keeping that light shining brightly for many years to come. Years later, Anne stood at the podium, accepting an award for her pioneering work in patient safety and ethical leadership. She looked out at the audience, a sea of faces representing the countless lives touched by the transformative changes at Central Hospital. She thought of Lily, now a healthy teenager, volunteering at the hospital, and of Sophie and Marie, young women embarking on their own paths of service and compassion. The ripples of that fateful day continued to spread, a testament to the power of one person's choice to make a difference. Retirement didn't slow Anne down. She traveled the world, sharing her story and inspiring others to embrace ethical leadership in their own fields. She established a foundation dedicated to promoting transparency and accountability in healthcare, ensuring that the lessons learned at Central Hospital would continue to resonate for generations to come. And so the story of Anne Dubois, the nurse who stopped to help at a car accident, became a legend whispered in hospital corridors, a reminder that even the small